I'm Cruz Devon, and welcome to This Gay Life. Today's show is on gay history, and there's something I kind of wanted to share with you. Yesterday I was having dinner with my partner, and it kind of dawned on me that I'm 35 years old, and I've been out for probably a good 13 years, and I consider myself well-schooled in gay politics and gay issues, and it just dawned on me that I thought, I have no idea where the gay culture or the community or very much of its history. And so this should be exciting not only for myself, but I'm sure for you. Our guest today is Dr. Ralph Smith. He's a professor of communications at SMSU. And I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your qualifications.
Well, I don't know what the qualifications are, but
well, I mean, I realize
I teach at SMS. I have a PhD in American history with a specialization in the history of communication and in particular the history of public persuasion. And most of my writing, dissertation, publications has concerned, as a matter of fact, evangelical persuasive campaigns in the United States.
Well, what is gay history?
Well, gay history is an effort to tell the story, and in a sense to recover the past of gay people and gay communities throughout the world, but with a strong concentration in Western Europe and the United States. And it is a relatively recent field of history, and a very productive one. Lots of material is being written about gay history right now. Now, to understand, in a sense, what gay history is, you have to understand first what history is. History is not a thing. It's a process. It's a process of telling stories. It's a process of sifting through evidence that exists in the present to discover what existed in the past. And history is always told from the point of view of an historian, from a storyteller, somebody who's really giving an account of something. Now, gay history, therefore, is a story or an account of what has happened to gay people. Some of this history is anecdotal and fairly amateur, some is professional. Professional history is history which is written by people who are trained to gather evidence, evaluate the evidence, and in some quote-unquote scientific way to set aside or at least bracket their own point of view and tell a relatively objective story about what happened in this case to gay people.
Well, is gay history relatively new? I mean, is it only in the past? Why is that? That's not necessarily because gay people have only been around for, say, 100 years.
Oh, no, not at all. Though that's a bit of an issue. There are really two answers to that question. Why is it relatively recent? Well, it's because gay people are becoming more visible. And this is a part of a larger process in which many groups of people have emerged into history, and people have been telling their stories. Black people, Hispanic people, women, Asians. History has become far more variegated. It's taken into account a lot of diversity. There's that old rap that history's dull because it's just about men who had a good deal of power deciding issues which were largely remote from common life. And for the last 90 years or so, history has concerned common people, ordinary people, the social history of our society and of other societies. Something else that's involved in this, I think, is that gay history emerges out of an effort to understand sexuality and gender. In a sense, gay history sort of nests in a larger subject, and that larger subject is the subject of what men and women do sexually, how they define themselves, what they think they are, and what they think they're about. So, study of diversity within the larger social history project, and then this concern with a particular self-awareness.
Well, you said that a lot of people, when you think of history, they think of like, ooh, yuck.
Yeah.
And they think of these textbooks where they have these really cornball pictures in it and
Check.
really weird stuff. And you're going, how does this relate to me personally? How does gay history relate to each of us? I mean, on one hand, it relates to gay people, obviously, because you're gay and gay culture has a history. But how does it relate also to straight people or non-gays?
Well, let's take that in three parts. The first part is you're right. Because of the way history has been written and sometimes taught, to most people it's spinach. I mean, it's just something that you may have to
Canned
eat.
spinach.
Canned spinach, absolutely. And it really doesn't have to be that way because it's account giving. Just if you find people interesting, history is simply an account or a set of stories about people, so it doesn't have to be dull. Now, the second part then is, what does gay history mean to gay people? And in fact, you referred to that. And the basic answer is because it is an attempt to give some answers to questions that you were just raising. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? As it began, gay history was fairly primitive. It was a sort of great gay people through history. And why that? Well, it's parallel because other groups, in trying to tell their stories, oftentimes begin precisely that, the great people of a particular group.
By pointing to say, so-and-so was a great black person, or so-and-so was a great woman.
And it's all about group pride. And then I think a second kind of thing slowly develops. The gay history becomes about, and it's a cliche now, but about empowerment. Because in a developing, more sophisticated form, gay history is about the emergence of gay communities, of which there are many throughout the United States, of which there is one in Springfield, Missouri. And then on a more complicated level, gay history is of significance to gay people because it helps gay people locate themselves in time, locate themselves in relationship to people, locate themselves in relationship to institutions. Self-awareness. They can say, that's where we were, here's where we are, and perhaps, though it's a non-historical project, perhaps here are some things we know that will tell us where we ought to go.
Well, there was something you brought up yesterday when we were talking, is about the idea of when gay bars first opened, that everybody had to have their hands on the table, and there was policemen in the bars watching to make sure everybody's hands stayed on the table. And in any bar today, I mean, whether you're in a straight or a gay bar, that would seem totally outlandish, almost like a Gestapo tactic. And that was not even, what, 30 years ago?
No, it certainly wasn't. And yeah, that is an illustration, because part of what gay history is about is it's about a history of oppression. And that's an illustration. Now, oppression of gay bars is hardly new. In 18th century England, there were ale houses called molly houses. And at times they were raided by a primitive form of the police force, and people were arrested and literally pilloried. Basically chained and exposed to public attack.
Goodness.
Yeah, people would throw rotten fish at them. Now, the oppression of this form of oppression, the attack on gay bars in New York through the early 60s, in San Francisco through the early 60s, was very much there. And I think younger gay people tend to forget that. Most of us live in the present, and we assume that what kinds of freedoms we enjoy now we've always had. But it's important for people to remember that until the recent past, a system worked very much against gay people. After all, straight gay bar owners needed a certain policing. There was a certain amount of corruption of the police force. People would be paid to not raid gay bars and so on. Now, that's largely a thing of the past for now. So that is an element. But the sense of that there has been a fairly oppressed past is something for gay people to remember, I think.
Well, that kind of brings in the conversation that usually comes up that all gay people want is special rights or something. And when they say, well, they're really not oppressed, but pointing to something in the past, they say, well, it doesn't happen anymore. I mean, I think straight people in general and the rest of the community should know that, you know, just because oppression isn't totally visible all the time doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
I agree, and this is important, as you suggest, for both straight people and gay people to remember. The president of Springfield's largest public university has recently taken the position that there's no reason for the inclusion of sexual orientation in the non-discrimination statement of the university. And the reason he gives is that there is no such oppression, and I think what's neglected in that argument is what perhaps he as an historian should know, is that there has been that history of oppression, which is a compelling reason for including such orientation. But in a sense, I don't want to make this downbeat.
Yeah.
The key thing is that a part of gay history is a more or less valiant struggle against this kind of stigmatization of gay roles, and against a fairly systematic effort to make gay people invisible rather. Society does want to, a large part of society wants to make gay people invisible. And I think in the last 30 or 40 years there have been fairly heroic struggles to create a gay community which is mutually self-reinforcing, to get not special rights but equal rights, not to be attacked for what they are, which is after all the right of all Americans. And it seems to me that that's the very positive side of gay history, this particular struggle.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about how the gay community and how did it evolve in America as we kind of know it today?
We've kind of a touch of background about gay history altogether, because gay history includes a lot of different elements. Now, a quick distinction. We have always had people, and there's lots of record of this, engaged in homosexual acts. Now, there's an argument among historians of gay people interested in gay history about whether these people who engage in homosexual acts are gay. Now, I take the position that no, these are people engaging in homosexual acts. That it is only in relatively recent times that you have emerging a gay community, a gay group. So that somebody in the 16th century would not regard themselves as being gay. They would regard themselves as people who were having sex in a certain way. But somebody in 20th century America might regard themselves as gay in that they define themselves as more than a person who engages in certain kinds of homosexual acts. Now, history of gay people in America, there isn't much as long as you don't have the conditions which produce a gay community.
What conditions?
Essentially, as it has evolved, the two conditions seem to be the family losing its economic function and the growth of big cities. You see, as long as the family, the extended family, including relatives and distant cousins and so on, had an economic function, the work was done in the home or on the farm, then it's very difficult to be an exclusively homosexual person living within a gay community, because you're living in that family. And the only way that you're going to earn your bread, literally, is to be a part of that family. Well, now, all of a sudden, in the 19th century, something else happens. People no longer work at home. They get jobs outside the home. And that all of a sudden means that the family no longer has its direct economic value. And so it becomes possible to live outside the family. And then second, it becomes possible to lead double and triple lives inside the anonymity of the city.
Yeah.
That's why, this isn't just history, that's why major cities in the United States today are the centers of large gay communities, which include people who live almost exclusively within a gay context. They work for gay employers, they go to gay entertainment, and the like.
Well, that kind of sounds like an argument that you hear on the radio, whenever on the talk shows, like from our friend Mr. Rush, that the breakdown of the family is the cause of all the problems of the United States. Is it the natural breakdown of the family? Is it natural that the Industrial Revolution came along and made cities to, I mean, is it truly the breakdown of the family that caused all the problems, or is that just one of the ways that problems just started happening?
That is a very important and very complicated question that gets us to a part of the context for gay history, which is that the history of the family is a complicated subject. The family as we have known it is a relatively recent and currently changing institution. A family held together only by affection, only including as it's idealized, husband, wife, and children. A family which has no direct economic functions is a relatively recent thing. In a sense, it late 19th, early 20th century. The fact that families change and what people think they're doing in families is well known to all historians of family life. Now, is the family falling apart? No. The ideal of the family created early in this century is changing. Now, it's strange, of course, that some of this breakdown of the family gets blamed on gay people. 2 weeks ago, the Carnegie report came out, and it's really astounding and frightening. The divorce rate well above 50%, number of children living in poverty above 25%, frightening stuff. And it's easy to scapegoat and say, hey, it's people like homosexuals who are causing the problem. Well, by definition, it's obviously people who are straight, who are ultimately largely causing the problem.
Well, that would mean anybody who works outside the home is basically also contributing to the factor that they're not keeping the family whole. That would be not only the mother and father, I mean, that would be the mother and father or any kids or anybody who's working within the family.
Yeah, and this gets outside the context of gay history, but another lesson might be that some of the problems of the current American family are caused by homophobia, because there's a certain pressure on children to, frankly, have sex in order to prove that they're straight. If you stigmatize a homosexual identity, then you're going to force children to prove themselves, and that in turn creates very unstable young marriages. Another thing that homophobia tends to do is it tends to divide families. When people discover that husbands, wives, children are gay, it can be a real issue which rips up families. But that's non-historical. But at any rate, no, I think the family is changing.
It's changing, not necessarily falling apart, it's just changing its form.
The family has had many different forms in the past. And what people thought they were doing in families has changed over time.
Well, that's really true, because I mean, even if you go back into your own generations, like my father, my father's father, and his father, each had a different definition of family, so it's not necessarily a strange thing that the definition is changing.
Exactly.
So. And
I think that the knowledge of family history is important to people in order to maybe reduce this effort to use the past as nostalgia. maybe people, particularly people my age, tend to think that the world is falling apart because the world is changing. And I think a more intelligent way of approaching this thing, instead of saying, let's go back to the way that things were when I was a boy or girl, maybe that's not the most intelligent approach. An intelligent approach might be to say, hey, what kinds of relationships work under the conditions which we have now? But that's a very hard message to sell.
Yeah,
because people,
and it's nowhere near as fun as saying, well, it was much better when I was younger.
Sentimentalizing, stereotyping the past, trying to return to it. And you never do return to it, you only return to your idealization of the past.
Which is never really true because you take out all the bad parts.
Sure. We do that always when we story tell, don't we? We only tell the parts we want to tell.
Yeah. You mentioned about homophobia. What do you know about the evolution of the anti-gay activism movement that we now have and seems to be very prevalent?
Well, anti-gay activity has been with us for a very long time. Many societies have tended to stigmatize gay people. One could sit around and theorize about it. It's not my thing, but many societies want to define gender roles very, very, very tightly. And one way of doing that is to create an out-group, which defines a boundary, and the out-group could be gay people. So you create this boogeyman, the homosexual, argue that there are very few of them, but since I'm not one of them, I must fit a standard normal mold. So lots of societies have had that kind of homophobia. Probably 19th century England, the English seem to have been very much into homophobia. Had a very difficult time with this, and a lot of homosexual people, at least, had miserable lives because of this process of stigmatizing us. Now, what we've got in the United States now is an interesting historical phenomenon. Some people are, on the most crude level, frankly, getting a lot out of riding the anti-gay cause. And oftentimes you will see that movements and leading movements benefit people. Sometimes it gives them money, sometimes it gives them status, sometimes it gives people a sense of purpose. And so that politicalization is important. Now, what's really critical here is that two things have happened that make this possible. One thing is that when you consider the range of possible prejudices, there has been a diminution of expression. You can't be in this society now prejudiced against people who are black.
That's not cool anymore.
Exactly. Even though we might want to be, and that's part of the reason behind this.
We're bigger than that now.
Yes. So who are we finally going to turn to? Well, we can tell blonde jokes, but we can engage in anti-gay political activity. So that's one element of that process. The other element is the rise of the gay movement itself. The organized gay movements really emerge after World War II. There's a reason for that. World War II shakes up everything in the United States.
Well, it shook up women, too.
Shook up women, shook up gay men and women. A lot of movement to the cities. The gay community, as we know it today, formed after World War II. And then that gay movement begins to demand equal treatment. And quite successfully so. To some degree, you got to remember a larger context. Black civil rights, student activism, and in a way this was a favorable time for gay demands, for gay people saying, we want equal rights too. Now, once you do that, you get a counter movement. Because as you become visible, people look up and say, hey, we don't want this to happen. And as a result of that, you get a counter movement, and usually the simplified version is Anita Bryant leads an effort to repeal efforts. And so a real easy answer to that question is there are anti-gay movements because there are gay movements, and currently that is the struggle.
So meaning the stronger that the gay movement gets, the stronger the anti-gay movement will also become, in a sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's that kind of Star Trek.
Not quite that easy.
I don't think we know what happens, but because history doesn't tell us what is going to happen. But I think we can say that, yeah, this has become a profitable cause for some groups in our society to engage in, just because gay people have made equal rights an issue.
Well, knowing the past and how the gay movement has strengthened and how it became, or actually kind of unionized itself after the World War II, what is the present situation? I mean, how do you see the present situation of the gay movement?
Well, if I could change that question a little, because I think the real question for this context is what does history tell us about the present situation? I think history tells us that there has been a significant change because the history of gay people has largely been a history of invisibility. That's why your show here is so historic. It's an
Not
effort,
just hysterical, it's historical.
and in fact other elements in our community. It's an historic change that the news leader, for instance, has been willing to make the gay community more visible. What's happening constantly in mass media has gone a long way toward it. So first, there's been that kind of change.
Just by becoming more visible.
Exactly. A second kind of change, and this is oftentimes hard for gay people to accept, they've got to recognize that their community is highly varied. Gay people as well as straight people tend to stereotype. And what gay people are and who they think they are has changed over time. And this raises issues inside the gay community about, for instance, gender. And these are
and
fairly...
what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Exactly.
What we want to do. Well, I really want to thank you for being my guest. It's been
a pleasure.
Wonderful information. If you would like some more information for further study, we have some titles of books available if you'd like to go ahead and roll those, the titles. Or we actually have an entire page and a half, almost 2 pages of books if you'd like to get those. And for more information on that, just send us a self-addressed stamped envelope and we'll have the address for that in a little bit. We have to go over some little things that are going on in the community right now. We have the Show Me Pride float trip, which is coming up June 10th through the 12th. We also have Cohab is having a picnic in June as well as a float trip, and you can call that number for that. Also, we're doing our fundraiser. We're having a silent art auction for the Chariot Project and for Cohab. It's going to be June 24th, and half of that funding is going for education of gay issues. Also, we've got something else going on right now. This is wonderful. I feel like I'm selling cereal. If you see one of these cans running around in one of the stores that you happen to go to and buy stuff, put a little bit of change in there. This helps us buy the tapes and the time to go ahead and put on This Gay Life. If you don't see a can, maybe you'll ask the proprietor if you'll put one in, or if they can. And I'd like to give you the telephone and address. Our telephone number is 888-6729. No, that's 2769. I'll get it. Anyway, it should be rolling here in the credits, and you'll get the address and telephone number of how to contact us. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and my guest, Dr. Ralph Smith.
Thank you.
Because it's just been a wonderful show. And thank you for joining us on This Gay Life.